Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to Job Search Radio on webtalkradio.net. I start each show with a job search tip that I call the Job Search Insider. And today's tip is about how to use stories in the course of your interviewing for maximum result. Now, stories aren't just for bedtime for people. We all tell stories to kids to help them relax and go to sleep, but that's not their purpose in an interview. Stories are a way of connecting with the person interviewing you in order to contextualize what it is that you've done in a less abstract, more concrete way. So when you use a story in your interview, use this formula. Number one, define the situation that you were in, the problem that you were asked to deal with. Number two, the obstacles that you had to face in the course of working on this situation. Number three, the actions that you took in order to solve this problem. And number four, the results, quantified with metrics wherever possible. Why do I say metrics? Again, firms like to hear about money saved, money earned, and get a sense of size and scope of the results that you achieved in the course of your work. So to sum it up, situation, obstacles, actions, results. In other words, soar in the course of your of telling your story. So that's my tip for this week. I'll have another one on the next show. And I want to introduce my guest to you, whose name is Frank Risalvato. Frank is founder of Interregional Executive Search, a leading provider of management recruiting, talent acquisition, and executive search services to what's primarily the insurance industry. His firm has expanded from a regional scope to a global talent acquisition partner with client firms in Europe, the Pacific Rim, and Australia. In addition, he also coaches and trains recruiters throughout the United States. Frank, welcome to Job Search Radio. I'm very happy to have you on today.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the invite as well. I'm going to enjoy having this conversation with you, and hopefully your audience will get something out of it.
I'm sure they will. You know, as an executive recruiter, I know you're in the position of knocking on people's metaphorical doors. By that I mean you're the one who's reaching out to people about searches and talking with them about an opportunity. How do you find people to reach out to in the course of doing your recruiting?
Well, it's a great question that doesn't have, unfortunately, a singular answer. There's a lot of different ways that recruiters become aware of reaching out to someone. One of the ways is usually word-of-mouth recommendation. Someone that got a job previously by a recruiter, whether it's us or any other search firm, may be happy in that position. 6 months later, 8 months later, recommends one or two former employees back at the original company to the same recruiter. That's a very common way. Another one will simply be what we call cold data collection. We are looking for a specific title, specific set of skills, and we'll use social networking, Facebook, LinkedIn, a company's own website, see someone listed on the employee directory, and reach out to that individual firsthand without having that referral or that prior recommendation. So those are two of what I would say are the most common, knowing of someone in the industry by using various sources of data or being recommended by someone else that we've had a prior relationship with.
So I'm going to break those apart for a second, and let me just start with referrals. So ostensibly what you're doing is reaching out to someone who you've had some contact with in the past and saying, hi, I'm trying to fill this position. Who do you know who I might be able to reach out to? Is that pretty much it?
Correct. Or the individual, a previous individual that we've already helped may come to us and say, hey, by the way, my job is going great. Amber and Jacqueline back in my original company are looking. If you can ever help them out, they were two of my hardest working team colleagues. So it can either be us asking or someone suggesting and making the referral proactively to us.
Thank you. And then you spoke about the cold referral, who you're finding through social media and other means. So when you're going online, you mentioned Facebook and LinkedIn and perhaps Twitter as being avenues. Do you do Google searches to find people as well?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't personally do all of the data end. I've got Stephanie and Debbie that assist me and help with a lot of the logistical end. So when we start a search, we may have 125 what we call rough, raw list to work from, and then eventually that gets narrowed down to 50 and then 30, and before you know it, we're down to the finalist 3, 4, or 5. But yeah, we do use all of those sources. Stephanie and Debbie handle what I call internet data mining research for me. We collaborate, go back and forth. I may say, take this company off. That's not the same type of company my client's going to be interested in. Add this one in. You missed one here, that kind of thing. So it gets massaged during the first several weeks of a search. And those social networking tools are critical. I always tell people it's very, very important to have a LinkedIn profile. Just last week, I had 3 people reach out to me asking, can you help me get a job? And I noticed in the first 40 seconds of the conversation, they didn't have a LinkedIn profile. So, well, wait a minute, you've been working for 5 years and you never made a LinkedIn profile. So today, the LinkedIn profile for anyone that's serious about their career is almost essential, because that's the first place people like us are going to be going to and using as a resource.
Do you find inconsistencies between what they tell you and what's on their profile with any regularity?
Maybe not inconsistencies. Everyone uses technology to different varying levels. So some people are very good about it. As soon as they change job, they immediately put in their new job title and a sentence or two of their new set of responsibilities. Others have enough information there to cover the last 3, 4, 6 years, but then they don't have their details or certifications or other things that are noteworthy or that they should be boasting about. So it's not really conflicting information. I haven't really found any conflicting information. I've just found that sometimes after interviewing someone, we find that there's a lot more valuable, useful, sellable information that reflects a very unique selling point, a unique achievement that has gone unknown by the individual professional.
And I know I find inconsistencies sometimes, certainly in my database between what someone's telling me today and what I've archived about them from the past. But folks, I just want to explain where I'm coming from in speaking with Frank about this. You see, I want you to understand how recruiters are finding people these days. And you've listened to perhaps to a show I did recently with David Perry about the importance of a LinkedIn profile and how to construct the profile for maximum effect for when someone like Frank or I are looking for you online. And what Frank has done here is confirm what David and I have previously told you about how important it is to have a great social media presence, particularly on LinkedIn. Now, let's go to the next part of this is, Frank, what happens when you tend to call senior professionals about searches? How do they tend to behave or respond when you reach out to the leadership staff?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great topic, Jeff. I'm glad you asked because one of the things that we get to see sort of a trait or a pattern, I guess, over the years doing this 10, 15, and then 20 years is that a manager of a department, whether it's a manager, director, assistant vice president, senior vice president, I could probably say that all the way up to the CEO, COO level. They're always very diplomatic. very thoughtful, and they have a lot of savoir-faire and finesse as to how to handle the receiving end of the phone call from an executive recruiter. Assuming, of course, the recruiter is professional, sounds like he or she knows what he or she is talking about, comes across as a professional, and is respectful of the individual's time, and communicates concisely. They'll always be respectful. They'll never hang up, number one. And they'll never say, no thanks, click. Never. In fact, I don't think in the last 3, 4, 5 years I've ever recall anyone at that level doing that.
That's my experience as well. Leaders tend, when I reach out to folks as part of my searches, I find the same thing. The leadership team is great. They're always aware that people get ahead not because they work the hardest or they're the smartest, although those are great qualities to have, that people tend to get ahead by being alert to opportunities. Sometimes those are internal to their organization, but more often than not, they're external. So they tend to be smart about this and minimally listen, even if they weren't thinking about looking for a position. And then there's everyone else.
That's exactly right. And part of that is because, at those levels, when you start going into a certain six-figure and double six-figure and triple six-figure salary range, the positions and the opportunities also decline, and they become fewer and farther between. So it's almost essential for survival to welcome those calls from recruiters and cultivate those relationships. And at the very least say, hey, I'm flattered that you called me. Let's talk tonight after hours, and then after hours, even if nothing comes of it, they'll usually say, well, I'm flattered that you called. Doesn't sound like this would be the right opportunity for me, but let's stay in touch with each other, and maybe something better might come down the road. And that's usually how a professional, or an executive or mid-level manager handles that type of thing, which contrasts significantly with, your 2, 3, 4, 5-year individual who might be a staff accountant or staff customer service rep or marketing person, or someone that is either recently out of college, may not be as skilled or savvy in handling, extracurricular relationships, I guess is the best way I could put it.
I'll refer to it as a networking opportunity with a search professional, because that's really what it is.
More accurate way.
It is a networking opportunity for a search professional, because frankly, if a job hunter waits until they need a job, it's always a lot harder and a lot more stressful to finding a job. So it's always better if you establish the relationship with recruiters, former colleagues, managers at different organizations before you actually need the relationship or need them to do something. And thus I'm always stunned by the response that sometimes the staff gives when the recruiting calls come.
Yeah, they really don't know how to handle it. It's they're 50% of the time dumbstruck by the call and are in foreign territory as to what do I do now. Well, I'm at work and I can't talk right now. Well, if it's a good search consultant, they should take that into consideration. Look, I understand you work in cubicles. You may not be able to speak. Can we talk later? I try to present it in yes or no questions whenever I reach to sort of staff-level individuals, since I know they can't just close their door like a mid-level manager can and talk to me. So it has to be handled differently by the recruiting professional, first of all, who has to be cognizant and respectful that you're calling someone that might not be able to speak from a cubicle or open cubicle, or there might not even be any cubicles. It could just be desks lined up, depending on the internal structure. And a lot of the folks on the receiving end are also usually at a loss, for how do I do this? Well, and I've had people that are just outright at the staff level now. Click, hang up. I'm not interested. Click, hang up. And then 5, 6 days
later, an opportunity as a result.
I'm sorry?
And they miss out on an opportunity as a result.
Sometimes that's true. I've had the same person call me back and apologize because they didn't know what to do. They couldn't talk, and they tracked me down, and they called me back 5, 6, 7 days later at a better time and from a better situation that they can speak more freely and privately. So it's different. It's a completely different process dealing with staff level individuals who are just starting out in their career versus seasoned executives.
So when the call comes in from the search professional, whether that's a third-party recruiter like we are or a corporate recruiter who's prowling online to find someone and found something about this individual and reached out, and let's say they're called at an inopportune time, what would you suggest they do instead of going, "Who gave you my name?" or "I'm sorry, this isn't a good time, I'm not interested, click"?
Right. Neither one of those. The best is, I'm flattered that you called. Can I at least get your contact information and reach you back at a time that's more convenient for me, if you can get that much out. Now, some people are in such a work condition that they can't even say that. That's understandable. And again, that falls on the shoulders of the recruiting professional who has to be aware you may be talking in code because you can't say anything else to me right now. But the best thing that you can do, especially if it's a private in-mail through LinkedIn, is thanks. I'm flattered that you reached out to me. It's nice to see that someone's noticing the work that I'm doing. But right now, I'm okay. Let's stay in touch. Should that change a year or so down the road? Something along those lines is always better than just saying, "No, thanks, I'm happy."
And it's a lot better. Let's use the LinkedIn example. It's a lot better than responding with "do not know" and damaging that recruiter, or whether that's corporate or third party, in the eyes of LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn has a practice where if you get too many of those "do not knows," they force the recruiter into a category where it's almost like being seen as a spammer, and it makes it harder for that person to reach out. When in point of fact, all they're trying to do is discuss an opportunity with you where you might be able to better yourself. Why harm someone with a "do not know" or labeling the message as spam? It's not right. And I also know when I reach out to people, when I coach them, or actually I explain to people when I coach them, often what I suggest they simply do, which is even a shorter thing, if they get a phone call from someone and it's a bad time, let's say they're in a meeting with their manager, number one is don't take the call. Or if they did, just simply say, "It's not a great time, could we speak at?" and offer up a couple of times and just simply schedule a time to speak, so that in this way, things can move forward rather than just, respond critically.
It's interesting that you mentioned about that on LinkedIn. I realize this conversation is to assist job hunters and not recruiters, but I actually have a workaround on the whole LinkedIn thing. I don't use the in-mail when I reach out to a prospective candidate. Instead, I use the invite to my group button. And then I change the invitation. Instead of saying, "I'd like to add you to my group on LinkedIn, I'd like to talk to you about a job opportunity." Now they're just rejecting my invitation to invite them in on the group, and they're not able to have the option to press spam or "I do not know" because it never went through in-mail, LinkedIn's version of email to begin with. So that's my little workaround there.
Very clever. Thank you. I got a tip out of this one.
Yeah, and also you get to invite a lot more people. You might be limited to 50 or whatever it is, 100 in-mails a month, depending on the account. We have the business premium account, which is a level below the corporate recruiter account, I believe, at least. You also work around those limits, those 50, 100 emails or in-mails per month limit, because I can send out as many invitations as I wish and simply put my message in the invitation box and change the text.
So now you're the job hunter, or the passive candidate, as we in the search profession refer to them. That is the person who's not actively looking for someone, for a new position. And you've actually connected with the recruiter, and you're having the first conversation. How would you suggest they start speaking with you? What would you suggest their side of the dialogue be?
So the side of the job hunter?
Yes, please.
For the side of the recruiter. I'm not sure which side you're asking.
I'd like it to be on the side of the job hunter. How would you say they should conduct themselves in the first call?
Well, again, you always want to be – it's a knee-jerk reaction to tend to treat, especially if you're not savvy. Maybe you didn't go to college. Maybe you just have 2-3 years out of business school, associate's degree in accounting. It all depends. I know people that have MBAs that are not quite sophisticated and savvy. But it all boils down to understanding that this could be a job, life-altering opportunity. Most of the people that we get jobs for wind up getting increases anywhere from 20 to 40 and even 50% when you factor in bonuses and what starts to happen 2 and 3 years down the road. Their life changes. It's not just a job change. So number one, you got to stop having this knee-jerk reaction and thinking the recruiter contacting you should be treated like a vacuum cleaner salesman. Now, some are pretty lousy recruiters out there, Jeff. You and I probably are aware of that. There are some pretty crummy ones that come into the business, can't hack it, they leave 2-3 years later, and they sound like vacuum cleaner salespeople. But assuming the person sounds legit and sounds like he or she knows what they're doing, you should be professional, diplomatic, and at the very least, courteous and appreciative for the time they've taken to reach out and contact you.
We agree on that. And what might someone be able to ask the recruiter in order to figure out whether they're a rookie or a veteran search professional? Is there anything you might recommend?
What someone should ask the recruiter?
Yeah. What might they ask in order to find out if they're a beginner or a veteran person?
Oh, you mean if the recruiter is a beginner or a veteran?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? So sort of how to reverse the interview process almost. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I have those questions come up all the time. I love questions like that, Well, how long has your company been doing this? And how did you wind up getting to represent, ABC Insurance or XYZ CPA firm, whoever the hiring company may be? That's a perfectly legitimate question, how did you wind up, how do you have your relationship with the company? Is this under by the way, senior level managers actually come out and ask, is this a contingency search or a retained search? And they want to know because retained search is usually a sign of a much more serious effort on behalf of the company. When a company hires a recruiting firm under a retainer, which means they have to prepay a portion of the fee up front in order to engage this recruiting firm's services, it's generally seen as a bigger investment of time and commitment on behalf of the company. They're serious. They want this hire to take place. Whereas, some managers ask, is this contingency or is this retained? If the answer is contingency, it could mean, not always, but it could mean that the company is just shopping and they'll hire someone if the person comes around. But if the person doesn't come around and 6-9 months later and they don't hire, they're fine with that too. So that's an example of a question that managers ask. What could a staff level individual do? Someone who's aspiring to be a manager? I like to use the word aspiring, because everyone has to start out somewhere. So did I, and so did you. Good questions are what's your relationship with the hiring company? What would the next step be if I say yes? How many years of experience do you have working in this industry, in my industry? Those are all perfectly valid questions.
And I would also suggest that the job hunter look at the recruiter's LinkedIn profile as well. One of the things I've found and this may be a shock to some of you, is that not everyone in our profession is particularly honest or forthright, unfortunately. And I've heard people say that they have 15 years of experience when it's more like 15 minutes of experience. And folks, if there's anything that you've picked up from Frank and I in this conversation, it's the demeanor of what a veteran recruiter sounds like. People in our profession who've been in the field for a number of years sound like we do. There's a depth to the knowledge and experience. There's a savvy that you can detect pretty easily versus the super anxious, unknowing kind of answers to questions that you might get. So it's not always what people say that matters, but how they're going to discuss things with you that will reveal a lot about their ability and capability. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Jeff, and that applies to a lot of businesses, or organizations. I was on our homeowners association once, and I've been on several actually, and you can tell the difference between. I don't want to sound arrogant, but you can tell the difference between someone who doesn't have education, who's blue collar, and doesn't care about education. It's one thing to not have it. It's another to not even care about pursuing it and obtaining it. Versus people that are constantly training and educating themselves, learning, trying to expand their vocabulary, expand their world of knowledge, and be able to communicate. Sometimes I read books that have nothing to do with recruiting. I love cooking books and history books and all kinds of books, books on ancient cultures and Marco Polo. And, my wife tells me, what do you read all these things for? Well, every now and then, the client on the other end makes a comment, and I'm able to have a little bit of a diversionary conversation that helps us to connect. And then we come back talking about business. So it does help indirectly in cultivating relationships. The more knowledge you have, and when you continuously pursue knowledge, even for job hunters who are looking to get to the next level. And by the way, Jeff, last year we had at least 3 individuals who got very good increases in their compensation and jobs, from senior level, for example, to a regional manager. And I had 3 cases where I had to pursue the individual over a period of 3 months to convince the person on the back end that this job was the ideal next position. I mean, I had given up after a month and a half, and then someone from the individual's trade association said, why didn't you call him? So I called again. I told you I'm not interested, but now the president of your association even agrees with me. That kind of thing. So sometimes, even smart people can't see or come to grips that this just might be the next best thing for their life. Without a very significant effort, and what was 3 months, in fact, with several individuals last year, and they now have their new job. They're thrilled, but it wasn't easy convincing them that they're worth more money. They didn't believe it.
And folks, if there's one thing you should know by now, number 1, jobs are never permanent in the new economy. And number 2 is most jobs you're going to consider accepting a job offer for are going to pay you more. And if you're a wealthy person, the amount of money you earn doesn't matter to you, then so be it. But most people I know cannot afford to forget about, and that's the way I'm going to language it here, they can't afford to forget about that a $20,000 raise over the course of 5 years translates into more than $100,000. It's a lot of money to leave behind, all because on a particular day you got a phone call and you weren't in the mood to maturely respond to the recruiter.
And just to add to that, Jeff, it's not just the money, but quality of life. I'd say all the positions we filled last year resulted in more money, but the people didn't move those jobs for more money, because sometimes more money means more stress, more aggravation, more heartburn. And no one wants to get congestive heart failure or an aneurysm just because they're making more money. But I'm very proud to say that we've matched up our hires, very well, and our placements quite well. And in all of those instances, they actually improved their quality of life. They got more responsibility that they deserved, that they weren't getting at the previous company, more recognition, more ability to get out of the office and meet clients. It's different in every case, but usually there was a big improvement in quality of life. In some cases, they got to work from home. They didn't have to go to the office and endure a 1 hour commute anymore. So it's different in all those cases, but there's something else that usually happens above and beyond the compensation part.
You're absolutely right. Frank, I know you mentioned to me that you have a couple of reports available that you'd make available to my listeners about interviewing. Could you tell people what they are and how they might be able to receive them?
Sure. So as far as my extracurricular activities, I get invited to speak and present and lecture. I hate using the word lecture because I try to make it interactive. I don't even like that word. When I hear lecture, I think of a boring professor in front of a classroom. But I have spoken at, I've lost track of how many California staffing professionals and New England staffing professionals, National Association of Personnel Services, and et cetera, et cetera. So most of my material is geared towards improving recruiters on the back end, getting those recruiters to be more savvy. But we do have 2 bulletins that we've been using internally for our what I call aspiring career professionals, people that are just beginning their career or still in the early stages. One is called the Top 10 Resume Blunders, and one is called Top 10 Interview Goofs and How to Avoid Them. And they're short bulletins. I wrote them myself. They've been edited 2 or 3 times over the last 8 years. They're what I would call a booklet, not really a book, or a brochure perhaps. And they're designed to get to the point real quick, to really focus on exactly why people fail to go from the first interview to the second interview in the case of Top 10 Interview Blunders. If you think about it, if you've been invited on an interview, it's been predetermined by all the tools we just discussed, LinkedIn, social networking, where you've worked, your resume, maybe a telephone interview, that you qualify for the job. That's why you've been invited in on the interview. Theoretically, almost anyone that gets invited in on the interview should have the offer. So if they don't, that means there was a blunder or a goof that took place on the interview. Most of those are correctable, and that's what my booklet gets into, to how to look for the bottlenecks, the pressure points of what it was that most likely caused that interview to not get you invited back into a second. Because those are things people have control over. You can't change your background, your employment, your education, but you can control how you conduct yourself during the interview. And the other one, Top 10 Resume Goofs, we use that just to explain to people in rare instances where we feel their resume could look better, and we'd like to make sure their resume is reflecting him or her as best as possible. We'll send that booklet out to let the person know why we're suggesting he or she make a few modifications on the resume. That's usually just to highlight something that's buried and you can't even see it, or something that wasn't even included, which is a major selling point, like a certification that they didn't even bother putting on. So that's what that covers. And if anyone's interested, they could email Deblynn, DEBLYNN, at IRESINC.com, and just put in the subject heading, top 10 interview, top 10 interview goofs, or top 10 resume blunders. I'm forgetting which one is which. One is blunders, one is goof, but they can just put, would like your top 10 interview or top 10 resume brochure, and Debbie will be happy to get that out to them.
Thank you so much for making that available to everyone. I appreciate it. And folks, we're going to be back next time with more advice about different elements of job hunting. I'm Jeff Altman, and if there's anything that I'm demonstrating to you over the course of the shows that I'm doing, is that there's a lot that goes into an effective job search. And that for you, you may know how to do your job well, but the skills needed to find a job are very different than the skills needed. The skills needed to find the job are different than the skills needed to do a job. And what I believe is that I can't possibly use this radio show to time things out perfectly for your specific circumstances. So if you have a question for me about some aspect of job hunting, if you have a concern because of the situation that you're in, reach out to me through liveperson.com, where I'm a job search and career coaching expert. Now, if you'd like coaching from me through different aspects of throughout your job search, find out more about my programs through VIPpersonalsearch.com, where I go through information about my formal coaching program for job hunters. Because I don't want your search to go on any longer than it really needs to. And I believe that you can quickly learn the skills needed to find work. And I know from experience the job hunters I work with find positions at least 35% faster than those who don't. In addition, if you'd like to get a free subscription to No BS Job Search Advice e-zine, which I publish weekly with advice for job hunters that's good anywhere in the world, come over to my website, jeffaltman.com. In the upper right of that page, you can sign up for a complimentary subscription there. Finally, for however long you remain with your firm, if it's trying to hire someone, reach out to me. I'd love to be able to help you. My email address is jeffaltman@thebiggamehunter.us. That's JEFFALTMAN @the